The following was recorded live at the 2026 Parish Life Conference of the Antiochian Orthodox Diocese of Miami and the Southeast, held June 10th through 13th in Springdale, Arkansas. We begin with a short presentation, followed by a live Q&A with the gathered audience.
Father Stephen told me that I should juggle or something while he was stepping out for a moment. So you guys missed the juggling. I was doing it.
He had 5 chainsaws. It was really impressive. Don't know how you missed it.
The hotel provided those chainsaws, actually. They came with the room.
Why they had chainsaws, we don't know. A circular saw, sure. I'm waiting for people.
Maybe even a jigsaw, perhaps.
Yeah.
I think we lost them with that series of jokes. It was not, at some point it wasn't funny anymore.
The problem with the circular saw is they usually have cords.
That's
which
true.
makes juggling them even harder without cutting the cord.
So like yesterday, we are going to go till about 15 minutes before Vespers. And this afternoon, Father Stephen has promised us a presentation about the habitats of rodents, mice in particular.
I'll get there.
I know that's what you came to hear, right? Who came to hear the mouse habitat? Yes.
Not like walked in the room, like came to Arkansas.
That's right.
To hear me talk about mouse habitats.
That's right. So don't disappoint them, Father.
Okay. I inevitably will. Okay. So this actually all started with me having a conversation with a well-known in Europe post-Marxist sociologist about the works of Simone Weil in pre-war France. And she asked me, what does Christianity have to say about alienation?
The TV series.
No, not the TV series.
Oh.
Or the film with James Caan. No, she meant alienation in the Marxist sense, which, to really shorthand, really shorthand, is the idea that at a certain point in culture, for Marx based on capitalism, but based on whatever, people's relationships with each other get replaced by relationships with things. So I no longer have a relationship with a person, I have a relationship with a thing. And so, just one quick example of that. If someone, roll the clock back, if someone is a furniture maker, they make a piece of furniture by hand, they make a chair, and they give it to me. I have that chair now, and even though that chair is an object, that object is part of a relationship with a person. I know the person who made it, I know the person who gave it to me. It's a gift I received from that person. So the object is part of a relationship between people, right? And then if I take that chair and I hand it down to someone and they hand it down to the next generation, then it's, oh, this is the chair I inherited from my grandfather. And it's part of the relationship with every time you look at it, right? Now, no offense to anyone here who's local, but if I go and buy a chair at Walmart, that chair is not part of a relationship between me and anyone in particular. It's just a chair, right? It's just a chair. And even if it's my favorite chair, it's just a relationship between me and a chair. There's no human on the other end of it. So that's just an example, but that dynamic has affected pretty much every area of human life at this point. Most people's jobs in their work life. You're not working at old man so-and-so's store, right? You're not working, you may have a boss who's directly over you, but they're also just an employee of sort of this nameless, faceless corporate thing, right? And most people nowadays are going to work for a paycheck because they have to have food, shelter, housing. The way you get the money for that is by working, right? And among younger people here are probably aware of this, especially Zoomers, there is now this great movement to minimize work. A lot of people in that generation, including some I know, it's not about, I'm going to find a career, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to advance in that career, I'm going to do this and that. It's, okay, here's how much money I need to live. I will work exactly enough to get that, and then stop. And because they're just sort of stopping at that point, it's not like the rest of their time they're going out and having adventures. They're sitting at home in front of a screen, which again is a relationship with an object, not with another person. And even if you might want to say to me that, well, sometimes they're having a relationship with another person through that screen, I would point out to you in how many cases the person who they think they're relating to on the other side of the screen turns out to not be that person at all. That it really is a relationship with the object. And now they're not even attempting that so much because now we have AI that you can have a relationship with and talk to. So this is the level of alienation that we've really reached. And this got super hyper accelerated by COVID and the lockdowns and the breakdown in in-person human relationships. So what does Christianity, and particularly Orthodox Christianity, have to say about this? I believe Orthodox Christianity, and by that I mean our parishes, actual in-person, in the parish, Orthodox Christianity, the liturgy, the community, I think speaks to this in modern American culture in three pretty unique ways, meaning there's nobody else who's really offering these answers. Okay. And to talk about the first two, we have to talk about Universe 25. And I know you don't know what that is, probably. Well, there's one person here who I think probably knows what that is, but otherwise, right, most people don't know what that is. I'm not talking about Earth 25 in either Marvel or DC Comics, though that exists in both of them.
Sorry.
We can talk about that later. Universe 25 was an experiment done by a fella named John B. Calhoun. Universe 25 was a mouse habitat. See, I got there. Right? And as you might guess from the name, it was the 25th such experiment that he ran. And it was called Universe 25 because he created this whole world for the mice in which they lived, fed, operated as a mouse community. I don't know what a group of mice is called, a pack. I don't know.
Rats
squad.
Are a pack. Rat pack.
Yeah, so maybe a pack. But Universe 25 in particular was an attempt to create mouse utopia because he was trying to study the effects of overpopulation. But there are some other things we learn in the process. So in Universe 25, in this mouse utopia, the mice had all the food they wanted, all the water they wanted. They didn't have to go look for it. It was just given to them. They were supplied with everything, bedding, right? Everything that a mouse could possibly want in life was just given to them. Within 2 years, the population had ballooned to like 12 times its original size. Within another 2 years, the last mouse died. So Mouse Utopia turned into a nightmare. The first lesson I think we can learn, and this one comes from Universe 25, is that part of mouse behavior is that male mice will compete with each other, meaning sort of fight, wrestle, tussle, in order to get the attention of female mice. And this is sort of normal animal behavior. When that happens, there's a winner and a loser. The winner finds a mate. The loser normally leaves that pack, leaves that group of mice, and goes and finds another one and starts over. You can't do that in Universe 25 because it's contained. And so the mice who ended up being losers had to stay in this mouse community and sort of bear their shame and their status forever. These mice eventually became violent. They would attack other mice. They would attack the young of other mice. I think there's a lesson here, and I think this is something we can observe in human behavior with this alienation. We've created a culture now where once you are shamed, once you are canceled, once you are ostracized, there is no escape. It will follow you forever. We call this accountability. Something you tweeted, something you said, something you did 12 years ago. It doesn't matter who you've become now. It doesn't matter what you've done since. It will be brought back up. It will be used to try to keep you from starting over. And when we force people to live with their shame, with no escape, what happens to them? They start to act out. They start to engage in fringe behavior, sometimes even violence like those mice. We're not that different. The Orthodox Church is the one place left in American culture where, if we're doing it right in our communities, someone can come in and start again. If we really believe, for example, in the sacrament of baptism, if we really believe that a person who comes into our church and is received into the church dies, the person they were is dead, is gone. All of that past history is deleted. And they get a new start as a new person, a lot of times with a new name. If we really believe in that and we really practice that in our communities, then this is the one place where an alienated, angry, shamed person can begin again and can escape their past. That requires a couple things of us. It requires that we don't keep bringing that past up. It requires that we don't decide that there's a group of people who aren't welcome in our parish because we don't like their politics one way or the other. We don't like how they've behaved in the past one way or the other. They aren't like us in some way. If we're welcoming them as we should, an Orthodox parish is the one place where they have that chance. Second thing, also from Universe 25. One of the reasons why the whole thing collapsed is that when everything the mice needed was provided for them and there was no work to do, the mice who would normally go and scout for food didn't go scout for food. The ones who would protect the group didn't have anything to protect the group from. All of the social roles within this pack of mice collapsed. Every mouse was the same, and they all had nothing to do. There was no hierarchy, no structure. And it got to the point where even mice were able to realize that their life was basically purposeless. Mice started dying deaths of despair in Universe 25. They stopped eating, they stopped drinking, and literally let themselves die. We can look out at our society, we can see the same thing has happened. Social roles, everything possible has been done to erode them, even at the level of male-female, let alone any kind of hierarchical structure or purpose or identity right? Everything has been pushed toward equality and therefore interchangeability. And so our world is full of people who have no sense of purpose. That's why they think that working 20 hours a week to pay the bare minimum, what's the point of more than that? You look at the statistics about deaths of despair in this country, it's frightening. Deaths of despair includes people just ending their own lives, but it also includes drug overdoses, addiction rates. As we talked about a little bit yesterday, an Orthodox parish can be the one place where someone, no matter what they do for a living, no matter what their talents are or aren't, can be given a sense of purpose, can have a community in which they contribute something that is uniquely theirs, that only they can contribute to that community, where they're appreciated for it and feel a sense of purpose about it. Maybe they're living in a cubicle or working in a cubicle and living in a little box apartment. It's completely interchangeable, and they're a drone. But when they go to church, they're a part of a community that loves them and cares about them and appreciates what they bring to the table. Again, if we're doing it right in our communities. This is an incredible opportunity for people out in our culture who are completely alienated otherwise. The third thing I think we have to contribute uniquely, this doesn't involve the mouse habitat. So, thus far for mouse habitats. And this has to do with something that another sociologist named Christopher Lasch wrote in a book called The Culture of Narcissism. It was written some years ago about the way American culture was headed, talking about how our culture has shifted so that people think about themselves and their lives in this very narcissistic way. The purpose of my life, the purpose of what I do, the purpose of my work, the purpose of anything I do is to bring myself happiness, right? To bring myself happiness, personally. And he contrasts this with the way people historically lived their lives and the way people in a lot of other countries still live their lives, which is that, and this is his phrase, people see their lives as a thread stretched between their parents and their children. That's what their life is. The first half of their life is receiving from their parents, receiving their culture, receiving their knowledge, receiving their wisdom, being formed and shaped by that. And then the second half of their life is passing that down to the next generation. So our lives are not just this thing by itself, but are this connection, this generational connection. And people in our culture don't experience this anymore. Because Christopher Lasch wrote that book, I think almost 40 years ago now. Meaning our culture headed that way a long time ago. And so the young people today were unfortunately raised by parents who that's how they looked at their lives. And if your parents look at their life as about their own happiness, that means they're not passing anything on to you. And that means you don't have anything to pass on to the next generation. And so you're dislocated. You fall into the idea that your life should be about making yourself happy just by default, because that's what everyone else seems to be doing. And increasingly, as we've just been talking about, people are not happy. And they aren't finding ways out in the world, in our culture, to make themselves happy, at least for very long. It should seem obvious in terms of that way of life. The Orthodox Church is incredibly uniquely situated now, even among religious groups in the United States, to answer that issue, that generational issue. Because I'm telling you right now, if you go to any evangelical church in this country, it looks nothing like it looked like a generation ago. And even further from the generation before that, and even further from the generation before that. You can go to Roman Catholic churches in this country, and they look nothing like they looked a generation ago, and absolutely nothing like they looked before Vatican II. Whereas the Orthodox Church, you can go to one of our Orthodox parishes today, and it looks, and the liturgy is exactly like it was, except maybe for language, a generation ago, and a generation before that, and a generation before that. So the Orthodox Church and an Orthodox community is still a place that a person can come to and as a new Orthodox Christian, be formed by it. Receive something that has been handed down for generations. Receive wisdom, receive understanding, receive tradition, receive a culture, and then can hope to pass that on to their children and to the next generation. But once again, we have to be serious about that. It requires that those of us who are older, I find myself getting increasingly old, fancy that, right? We have to be serious about passing on what we've learned and what we've come to understand to the newcomers, to the next generation. And the people who are newcomers, or newer comers, right? As a lot of the people here who are young Orthodox Christians, have to become serious about receiving. Not about figuring out for yourself from books, but receiving, forming relationships with the people who have been formed by the Orthodox community and receiving that yourself, so that you'll be ready to pass it on to the next generation when your time comes. Right? So 25 years ago, I was brand new to the Orthodox Church. I was having to receive. Now I'm in my 50s, right? Now it's pass on, right? And some of you sitting here right now, you may have been chrismated like a month ago or something. The time will come. What has happened to me will happen to you. Right? You will, Lord willing, God grant you all many years, you will be an old man or an old woman. And you will have things to pass on if you've received them. If you've spent your time now receiving them. So I think all three of those things form a kind of treatment, maybe even a cure to the alienation of modern society. All of us have a role to play in our communities in making that treatment, making those things available to the people who show up at the door, who are alienated and disaffected and frustrated and angry and confused and don't even know how to have a conversation with a person and have weird views of things and extreme politics they got off the internet and all that stuff, right? They desperately need what we have to offer. And if we're serious about having it on offer and giving it to them, then I think Orthodox Christianity is what Christianity has to say about alienation. So questions?
Come on down.
Ancient Near Eastern texts, such as the Baal cycle, portray the pagan god Baal as a rebel, the hero of a revolution, worshipped and glorified for his long string of victories. In the Baal book, a biography of the devil, Father Stephen DeYoung shows that the Hebrew scriptures consciously turn the Baal story on its head, depicting him as a failed and defeated rebel who nonetheless tries to steal the glory that belongs to Almighty God. From these scriptures, the figure of the devil emerged within Jewish and Christian tradition. Father Stephen works through the Old and New Testament passages that refer to various Baal stories, and he surveys Baal worship through followers' beliefs, religious practices, and liturgical life to show that the figures of Baal and the devil, the prince of demons, are one and the same. You can find the Baal book at store.ancientfaith.com. That's store.ancientfaith.com.
So we have these two mics here.
And see, I did talk about mouse habitats. You
Yeah,
thought I was joking yesterday.
I did give it a 50-50, actually. So.
Hello. Hello, Fathers. This may actually tie in a bit more with what you talked about yesterday. Sorry. But Father Andrew, you talked about the need for access to Orthodox worship and life through like a language that people understand. So I come from a background working in deaf ministry from the Protestant world. So that's deaf with an F, not a TH, as some people sometimes mishear, ironically. So I'm a bit familiar with things like the Orthodox Christian Deaf Association, but I'd like to know, maybe from your perspective or experience, if the Orthodox Church has some kind of vision or plans for incorporating deaf people into Orthodox worship and life, whether that is, interpreting, or if there's a possibility of like signed liturgies, or if there's a possibility of deaf clergy, or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, this is definitely not my expertise, but I am aware of at least a little bit of children's content that has been made on YouTube with someone who's doing it with signs along the way. But yeah, I don't know. My experience has always been that when there's a new group of people that the church needs to minister to, that the people that tend to be out in the front of that are the first people from that group who come into the church, right? And so, for instance, one of the less known, but I think should be better known statistics about Orthodoxy in America right now is that 14% of Orthodox Christians in America are Hispanic, which is a big surprise, I think, to a lot of people, seeing some heads nodding. And the people that have been really in the forefront of working with Hispanics have been Hispanic clergy and other Hispanics that have become Orthodox. So, I mean, I know some people that are involved with the Orthodox Christian Deaf Association. And what I would just simply do is encourage them and say, like, look, this is your mission, because most of us don't have the skills to do that. I certainly don't. I'm trying to imagine deaf clergy. That would be a difficult thing to do because it would be hard to serve the liturgy if you can't hear, because so much of what's going on in the liturgy is oral. So I don't know how that would be possible, but I'm not a bishop, so fortunately no one is asking me to make any decisions about that. But there's definitely room for a lot of this ministry, and it's important, that's what I have to say about it. I don't have a lot to offer in that regard. You, Father?
I don't have a ton, but I have been in a situation multiple times as a priest where I've had a deaf parishioner present and I've had someone sign translating like my homily and some other pieces of the liturgy. So I think at least I think one of the things you have to do as a priest is when you get the blessing of having someone in your parish, right, who has a little different issues than maybe other people, it's actually a blessing to get to figure out how to help minister to them most effectively. I think it kind of helps everybody in the parish, right, in doing that, because it causes them to have to think in a way that they normally don't think. Things they normally take for granted, they now have to think about, right? And so, at a very basic level, I would hope that every priest in our archdiocese would, if they have a deaf parishioner, would start thinking in that direction. We need to find someone who knows ASL. We need to have translation going on. And how do we do that in a way that's not disruptive, but that's also helpful to the person? And I think those local solutions are relatively, usually, easy to do, right, in the sense of doing them. I think that's the place to start. And then as things progress, I think, it goes above our pay grade to the bishops, right, in terms of bigger, larger issues.
I was agreeing with everything you were saying about people coming into the church and getting them involved. But what about the people that are not coming into the church, that was there before and for some reason they left? How do you get them back? I mean, I have a son right now that he claims he's going to a church in California, but not an Orthodox church. And to me, he's not going to a church. So how do you get the other people in our neighborhood and stuff like that, since we aren't going knocking on doors like some of the other places. We don't have really an evangelism committee going out and trying to recruit people. We just wait for them to come. I'm wondering if there should be something else added to that.
Yeah. So that's two groups of people, and I think that the approach to each of those groups is a little bit different. If I may say so without sounding too ridiculous, we're the evangelism committee. Not just the two. Yeah, you were elected to that committee, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, appointed.
When do we meet?
Not just the two of us, but right now, at this moment in Orthodox history in America, the vast majority of evangelism is being done through media. The reason why people are showing up at the church is almost all of them have had some kind of encounter with orthodoxy through the internet before they show up, which is how they even heard about us to begin with. But nonetheless, I think parishes do have a duty to their surrounding neighborhoods. And I mean, if you put a big signboard out front saying we're going to have a big presentation, this is the way that in the 1980s and the 90s, those of you who are around that long, remember Orthodox evangelism was being encouraged, like have a big event, bring a speaker in, hand out contact cards. This was literally in the handbook of evangelism that the Archdiocese published right when the Department of Missions and Evangelism was first formed in 1987, when the former EOC was brought into the Orthodox Church. I remember reading through those, yes, you were there, yes. So I remember reading through that handbook and so forth, and most of those techniques would not do anything now because people, they see a million billboards and signs and so forth, and as Father mentioned, a lot of people are just at home all the time. So we have to take a different approach. But I think that the way to connect with our immediate neighborhoods is probably to offer them some kind of service, something that will help to meet their needs. And not in a bait and switch way, like come on down, to have a free meal. And oh, by the way, have you thought about where you would go if you died tonight? Let's not do that, okay? Let's not be manipulative, but just to care for them, to love them in a practical way. I mean, with regards to the first group that you mentioned, sir, about the people who have left and are not back, the first thing I'll say about that is I think it depends a great deal from person to person as to how to succeed in doing that. But I'll also tell you, so I served 13 years in parish ministry before I started doing what I do now. And at the beginning of my time as a pastor, there were a number of people in the parish who came to me and essentially asked this question. They said, there's these people that used to be here and they're not here anymore. And then occasionally they would say, well, they were here until you came, just as a point in time to mark it when it stopped. Father, you need to go get them. And, I was a young priest and I was trying to love everybody. And I thought to myself, okay, well, these people belong to the parish. They're in the directory, So I'm gonna put out the effort to do that. So I emailed them all, if I had an email address for them. I sent them all letters to their house. I called them all on the phone. I even scheduled house blessings and went to their front door and knocked on the front door. And if they weren't home or they didn't answer the door, which happened at least once because I could hear movement inside, I left them a note. And I did that with every single one of these individuals and families. And the number of people that responded to that was exactly 0. 0. And I went back to their family and friends who had, told me that I needed to go get them. And I said, well, this is what happened. I emailed them, I sent them a letter, I called them on the phone, I knocked on their door, no response. Do you have any other suggestions for what I could do? And they didn't. And I said, here's my suggestion. Like, that's your brother, that's your uncle, that's your cousin, whoever. I bet you they will listen to you before they will listen to me. Which may not be they may not listen. This is why I think it's particular to the individual person. But I think that when people leave or drift away is what happens in most cases. Often it's because there's been some kind of change in life. A lot of people, for instance, when they move to a new city, stop going to church because they just never picked up the habit. which is why many college students, why they work so hard to grab them when they arrive at college, because they're in a new place and often the habit just disappears and mom and dad are not making them go anymore, right? Sometimes there's been something that's happened in the parish. Sometimes people, if there's a new priest, they just don't like the new priest. Or maybe he's a jerk or a loser or untalented, can't sing well.
Quit talking about me.
Can't preach well.
I'm right here. Like, so rude.
I remember, can I tell a slightly less flattering story about our common job?
Yeah.
Okay, so one thing that a lot of people don't know is that my first 2 years in pastoral ministry, I served as the assistant pastor at our cathedral in Charleston, West Virginia, at St. George Cathedral in Charleston, West Virginia. And then as I was on my way out, 3 weeks before I was being transferred to become a pastor, Father Stephen was brought in, which as far as we know is when we met. It might have been before that, but
we met before that.
We did, okay.
Yeah.
That's when I remember.
You just don't remember.
I don't remember, okay.
And I failed to make an impression, I guess.
Actually, the first time I met my wife, neither one of us remember it happening at all.
Yeah.
We left zero impression on each other.
It was late at night in the basement of the Antiochian village, and you were rambling about Archbishop Efthymios of Faith.
Oh, okay.
So you were kind of distracted from everyone else in the room.
That sounds like a true story.
Yes.
But anyway, I remember, I think you're the one who told me about this. You know, shortly after Father Stephen arrived there, so at that parish at the time, they would have a practice that you could drop questions in a box, and then they would get published in the bulletin, and the senior priest would answer the question. And one of the questions that arrived, you know what I'm going to say, right?
I think so.
Okay. One of the questions that arrived shortly after Father Stephen took up the post as the assistant pastor was, are priests required to take voice lessons? It's true. It's true.
This is a long family tradition. My grandfather was thrown out of the church choir for not being able to sing. My father was told he could stay in the church choir, but that he should just mouth it. So, wow. When I was coming into the Orthodox Church and he saw us first, I had been, preaching in Protestant churches. And so he saw his first Orthodox liturgy and he said to me, you idiot, because we're Dutch family, right? He said, you idiot, you can preach okay and you can't carry a tune in a bucket. So you join a church where they have a 5-minute sermon and they sing everything. Like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah. But the thing that I learned from that pastoral experience was that there were also a bunch of people standing there with their hands open, ready to receive something that I wasn't giving them because I was spending a lot of time trying to chase people that didn't want to be there. Which of course is very painful if that's your friends or your family, that they're not there. But if someone doesn't want to be there, it doesn't really matter how hard you try to convince them. They're not going to do it. It's like, guys, when you were in middle school or high school and there was this girl you were really into and she was just not into you. It didn't matter how hard you chased her or bugged her or passed her notes in class. I don't know if people do that anymore. Do they do that anymore? She just wasn't into you, And
trauma is coming out, I think, right now.
Thank you. But that's the way that it can be. So I think that what needs to happen is for an individual to want to come back to church is they need to see that they need Christ. And usually they can't see that by someone telling them that. But what we can do with folks that are in that situation, and in particular to them, the relationships that they're in, is number one, we can and should and must pray very earnestly for them. If we really care about their salvation, we have to pray for them very earnestly. And know that, as one of the saints have said, every time you pray for someone, God sends them a good thought, which is such a comforting thing to know. But also to love them in a way that's practical and direct, because people's experience, if you want people to meet Christ, He sent you. You're the one, right? And when it comes to family members, it can be very difficult because you've got years and years of relationship and maybe who knows where the relationship is. But with God, all things truly are possible. And I have seen people come back. They say that amongst Orthodox Christians in America, there's so-called cradles and converts and reverts. and retreads. Retreads are former clergy that became Orthodox clergy. So there are reverts. There are people that it becomes real again for them. But it may be that they need to spend some time in the desert so that it becomes clear to them that they need Christ. So that's what I have to say.
Yeah, I'll just say real quick so that Father Hans can ask me whatever zinger he's got. A lot of folks act like the Orthodox media stuff is a new thing, but there were a lot of parishes going back who were putting their services on public access cable, on TV, local TV stations, on the radio back in the day.
Yep.
The main difference is that, in the past, someone watching it who was getting drunk and cussing at the screen didn't have a comment section to go and weigh in. So don't read the comments.
Never.
Go ahead, Father Hans.
This is for you, Father Stephen. I think what you're talking about, the angst, the existential angst, and the cultural decline and everything is really profound. I don't hear it much in the church, but I think you hit something really key, and I agree with you 100% because it's been my experience. This is why the people are coming in, especially the young men. The church, by and large, doesn't quite understand the depth of it yet, but I think it will. I think it's impatient with it sometimes because of it's a shallow understanding of what's really going on culturally and what's going on in their hearts. It's going to necessitate a deepening of the spiritual life in the church as well, because this is going to compel a change. Because I'm with you. I think this is going to continue, and I'm 100% agree with you when you said that there's only one place left, and that's the Orthodox Church. There's nothing left in the culture. The other Christian communions, whatever you want to call them, are kind of in a functionally collapsed. They're not going to be able to address this. But it's going to compel a change in the spiritual life of our parishes as well, and it's deeper than just mere accommodation. So, given what you've said, I'm presuming here you've already thought about that, and I would love to hear some of your ideas and reflections on that.
Absolutely, yeah. So, I think some of that impatience comes from, if you're in the church, hopefully you're already reconnected in ways that the person walking in for the first time isn't. And so we take things for granted. Or you're from a previous generation that didn't get quite as alienated in the first place. Because I've had that experience where you get somebody showing up at the church who literally doesn't know how to walk up and talk to another person. They don't know what to say, they don't know how to start, they don't know, right, where coffee hour is just terrifying. We say, stay for coffee hour, have a good time, get some food, right? That to them is like, hey, would you like to meet, the rabid dog we keep out back, right? Like, that's super hard for them. And it's very easy for those of us who are further along and we're connected to look at it and be like, what's wrong with that guy? Like, what, I think that's like that kind of thing is where some of that impatience and stuff comes from. But honestly, we're just talking about the main theme of every book of the New Testament. We're talking about Christian love. We're talking about actually loving people. And it really is Christian love when it's someone you don't like. You can love someone without liking them. You can love someone even though it's tough to love them.
That's why we're friends, Father.
Yes, I know. It's improving me by loving someone such as you.
I know.
Whereas I am a delight, and so you just naturally fell into my orbit. But no, the actual love and actual compassion. This is one of my favorite recent quotes. Okay, right after WrestleMania this year, Roman Reigns, who's probably the greatest professional wrestler of our era, said this amazing quote in an interview after his match. He said, "Everybody wants you to do good, but not better than them." And I was like, that's perfect, right? Everybody wants you to kind of be okay, but not doing better than them. That's where you enter into the realm of Christian love. When something good happens for someone else, when you see them succeeding, when you see them reconnecting, when you see them thriving, you rejoice more about that than if it happened to you. You would rather see it happen to them than happen to you. This is the greatest statements of love in the scripture. There's two of them. One is Moses and one is St. Paul. When each of them say, I would rather be cut off, blotted out of the book of life, go to eternal hell, if it would mean that these people who don't like me, these people who hate me, who say nasty things about me, in Moses' case, who have tried to kill me, I would rather go to hell than see them perish. I have not achieved that level of love for anybody, if I'm honest. Right? But that's Christian love. So when you look at those people who are coming in, rather than seeing the state they're in right now, love is wanting nothing else but to see them thrive, grow, reconnect, all of those things. That becomes your goal.
And the love, when they receive it, heals them from the deleterious effects, psychological, emotional, spiritual, of that isolation, of that angst. It heals them. There's no other place for healing for them except the church.
Yeah.
I would like to dovetail off of that a little bit and say that, the way that the place that most of us at least have the opportunity to learn that kind of love is within our families. Most marriages start with a strong sense of both people feeling they're receiving something great from the other person. And those who have been married, more than a few years know that that feeling does not persist on that level for the whole marriage. It can kind of come and go.
Except for my marriage.
Except for Father Stephen's marriage.
America's sweethearts.
Exactly.
Me and my wife.
But that you're eventually offered the opportunity with your wife or your husband, but then also with your children, actually in some sense greater with your children in some ways, to give love and not to receive anything back, which is what actual real love in its pure form really is. Like Christ died for us while we were yet sinners. Christ didn't say, look, if you do the following things, I will die for you. He died for us while we were yet sinners. And this is really very, very difficult, of course, to love another person and to bury your own need to be loved, to be paid back, to be whatever, right? I mean, God willing, there is a mutuality in all those relationships, God willing, that's the ideal. But real love always gives without expecting in return. And I think this is one of the reasons that we need to work, so much on our marriages and our parenting and so forth, so that when someone comes to the parish, we can become their mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters in more than just a metaphorical sense, in an actually analogical sense. That it functions in a way similar to the way that we have learned that kind of love within our families. The best advice I've ever heard about marriage, and it would seem obvious about parenting, is don't keep score. I remember when my first child was born, I thought to myself, there is nothing this person can do for me. We have to do everything for this person. Because that's, especially when you have a tiny little baby, that's just the way that it is. Their life depends on you. And that's actually a really amazing realization to have. And I think that we need to kind of apply that to more of our relationships, actually.
Also, once your kids aren't teenagers anymore, they'll start to give back, I think, a little bit.
Well, I'll leave it to you to let them know that.
Okay.
Okay, yes.
Fathers blessed, thank you so much for the talk, very fruitful. I'm a millennial, I'm not a Zoomer, but just to speak to your topic of having relationships with screens and all that, like starting with my generation, we were kind of fed this idea that our opinions are so important and every thought has to be expressed online specifically. So coming into the church, it's real easy to fall in love with all the richness of the faith. And I think there's a big temptation for new converts to like start a podcast or a YouTube channel about the faith. And I think that's like a big temptation. So provided that you are in the church and living the life of the church the best that you can, what would you say to deal with that temptation to take that zeal and go online and start to make content?
I get this question a lot. I mean, I think the first thing is like, no. You know, it's one thing, of course, to talk about your faith with other people through the internet. You know, to say, hey, this is my experience, you know, or to whatever it might be. But it's another thing to put a camera on and a mic on and say, let me tell you something. Even if it's just let me tell you about my own personal journey or whatever. I know full well that the vast majority of people who do that with good intentions. There are some. I'm pretty sure that's not the case. But the vast majority do it with good intentions. But here's the thing, when you say, especially when you're really new in the faith, when you say, look at me and listen to my journey, I just have to say the very hard thing, which is, why is your journey so important? Everyone needs to know it. That it needs to be put out there for people that you don't know to hear it. It's one thing for you to tell that to your friends, but it's another thing entirely for you to make it a public thing, right? And I waited for years and years before I started talking about my own particular experiences becoming Orthodox, even after I was doing lots of public stuff. I still prefer not to, but yeah, I think it's dangerous because there is an immediate gratification that comes when you get clicks and views and in some cases actual checks in the mail, right? And you know, I just remember, you know, what's her name, Sally Field, you know, at which awards it was, she's like, you like me, you really, really like me. Like that's kind of what YouTube in many cases is kind of about. It's people that want to be liked, which is a completely understandable human need. But when it's through, and this is actually a really important concept that I think we all need to grasp a hold of these days, when it's through a parasocial relationship, then there's a fundamental distortion in it, right? So if you don't know what that word is, I had someone come up to me yesterday, I'd never met him before, and he said to me, I really feel like I know you. And I said, you have a parasocial relationship with me, because I didn't know him. And a parasocial relationship is when you have the feeling of knowing somebody because you've watched them on the screen or listened to them or whatever it might be, and you don't actually know them. It's not mutual, right? And another big danger in that, of course, is that parasocial relationships are had with figures who you don't know them. What you know is the version of them that they are putting out there for everybody else, right? So, you know, I do a lot of podcasts, and some include talking about my life. I don't talk about everything in my life. I talk about certain things in my life. So what you get is a selection. What you get is a curated sample. Even the person you're listening to right now is very different than the person that my wife knows. You know, it's different than the person that fathers, because we have offline conversations. You should hear them. Actually, you'll never get to hear them. And so when someone's new to the faith and they turn on a camera or turn on a mic or start writing a blog or whatever and say, everybody follow me on my journey, what they're doing is creating this parasocial relationship. And it actually does go both ways. The creator has a parasocial relationship with a group that they don't know, but they see signs of them. They see thumbs up, they see angry reacts, they see comments, they see, usernames that are not their names. So it's a very mediated, alienated set of relationships that has a lot of problems to it, right? And with the people that I work with, we often have conversations about this because we're working on the internet, and so we're trying to figure out ways to work there in a responsible way that is beneficial to the church and doesn't simply feed all of the kind of pathologies that exist because of what's going on there. I mean, even despite all the kind of dark things I just said, I still believe that we need to have missionaries working on the internet because this is where people are going to encounter our faith. And you know, by God's grace, that's what we're trying to do. But yeah, I think that, so especially someone that's new, it's fine to talk with other people through the internet about your faith, but when you make it about yourself, then you have a big problem. I mean, I literally just the last couple of days, I had a priest come to me and say, "Father, I have 2 YouTubers in my parish, what should I do?" It's true story. And you know, in one case, it was a person who was making at least some of their living on YouTube before they came to the church. So you would be asking them to set aside some of their income. And I think that's what we need to do for the sake of people's souls, actually. Because it is a rough and tumble world, let me tell you right now. And it's very, very seductive to have people like you, like the version of you that you put on the screen. So, yeah, I mean, there's a reason why it says in the scripture that neophytes should not be ordained or should not be teachers. It says that in the scripture. So we don't know better just because we have better communication technology than the apostles did. And I've watched people crash and burn who began to be ordained or to teach or whatever early on. So that's what I think about that.
So I disagree with Father Andrew a little, but we'll get there in a second.
All right. Okay. All right.
And not just about a specific case. But so, I mean, there is a general agreement in that I'm kind of famous in my parish for telling catechumens they can't start a blog. Like, I just have this rule, you can't.
People have blogs
right?
now?
Well, this was years ago.
Years
now
ago when blogging
you can't start a YouTube chat, you can't start a, right, whatever.
There you go.
And, you know, hypothetically, there would come a point where I would let them, but nobody who's deeper into the church has asked me yet. So, but this has to do with what I was talking about before. You have to receive before you pass on, right? And if you're new in the church especially, you're in the receiving phase, okay? The place where I have a little bit of disagreement, and this is because I don't think we've done enough thinking about a very new type of media yet, and that's streaming. Being a streamer is fundamentally different than having a YouTube channel where you just record yourself, you record videos. That's like pretty much the same thing as TV or a podcast or that kind of thing. But there is now this thing, and if most older people probably aren't familiar with it, don't understand it, where people will be on for hours, sometimes all day, right? 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 hours.
I know, I see you on those streams,
I
Father.
go on some of them sometimes. And they're in front of a camera. And they're looking at stuff on the internet or playing video games, switching to doing different stuff. And just talking to their chat, and their chat's communicating with them. It's a very different type of media, right? And the reason I think we need to do more thinking about it is that not only are there now an increasing number of people who make a living doing this. I know that seems strange that you could make a living doing this, but you actually can. I'm not. I have a Marvel Rivals Twitch stream. I make tens of dollars a year off of it. But these other folks are making a living. And for example, you have people who are Orthodox or become Orthodox, but that's not primarily what they talk about. They might mention it if somebody says something, right? And I think telling them they can't, right? So, and then there's other people who it's like want to do 8 hours of theology talk, right? And those are very different things. And so I think it's more a thing where we need to do more thought about that and come up with some really good guidelines. right? And give people in particular. The Orthodox Church is good at this, about not just making some broad rule, but even if we make a broad rule being like, okay, well, in this particular case,
Yeah.
right, here's what's best, and giving guidelines about, at this stage in your journey, you could talk about this kind of thing and that kind of thing, but don't go here, here.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a difference between, interviewing people and presenting your own material,
And,
right?
or, throwing out polemics at other churches or whatever.
Yeah,
Or other
yeah.
Orthodox Christians.
Right, yeah. So I think it's a finer toothed comb.
Yeah.
than just saying,
Yeah, of course.
right,
We don't
do this.
disagree.
But
Or did you come to the part where we disagree?
one positive, well, we won't go into it
Oh,
more
okay.
detail than we need to. There are positive things coming out of the internet. And as someone who has deliberately entered into this milieu to try and participate and hopefully try to do it in a positive way, though if you listen to Twitter, I'm demon possessed.
You're the worst.
Now. Yeah.
Actually, this morning it was announced that Father Stephen is the false prophet and that Jonathan Pajot is the beast. But
Yes.
anyone knows, looking at the two of them, that Father Stephen is clearly the beast.
Definitely the beast.
And indeed, his birthday is one of the numbers of the beast.
My birthday is June 16th, so it's 616. But
So nice try, Twitter.
But one of the trends now that I think is a beautiful thing is these guys who are streaming and stuff who are Orthodox are now saying again and again, you can't do Orthodoxy on the internet.
Yeah, thank
There
God.
is no Orthodox internet. Go to liturgy. Go to liturgy, go to liturgy, go to liturgy. I know one streamer who has started banning people from his chat if they're in his chat too long without going to liturgy. Right? He's like, you're not going to just sit here and talk about Orthodoxy. You're banned until you go to liturgy. Send me a photo of you at an Orthodox church,
Wow.
and I'll let you back into the chat. Yes.
Also a signed letter from your priest.
So there are ways we can shape this. It doesn't have to be a yes or a no. There are ways we can shape this and make it more positive.
Yeah.
It was a question, but you answer all the things just listening to you. I've been following you for a long, long time. But at the same time, what you have taught me and what my priest has allowed for me to do in our parish is to greet everyone, regardless. When we became Orthodox, it was Father Gordon Walker who adopted me, practically. And he took the shyness out of me. He said, Myrna, you're short. Nothing you can do about it. You're brown. Nothing you can do about it. You have an accent. Nothing you can do about it. You're an alien. So, accept it. Accept who you are. So, next Sunday, you'll be the greeter. That was 40 years ago. 40 years ago. And then my priest right now, he said, yes, you can continue doing what you're doing. And what I'm saying is, for the people who are sitting behind me, pretty much, I greet everyone, regardless if they want to talk to me or not. Whether they see me the way they want to see me, that's okay. But through the past 3, 4, 5 years, it has grown, and I have learned how to see who they are, or what they need. And I have learned just to say, sit down, stand up with me. That's it. Don't pick up a book. Just listen with your eyes. You smell everything. You will do that. And through the last few years, I can see that Orthodoxy is aiming to the heart. But we, the laity must be gracious, regardless if they have tattoos coming out of their ears. I mean, it's just, sometimes it was frightening, but yet you could see that it's a God's child. And for me just to say, hello, how are you? Sit down with me. Are you sure? Yes, sit down with me. And if they want to go to the coffee hour, I don't expect for them to do. They had to do it themselves. So for us, Orthodox, who have embraced the faith, we must be givers, just like you say. We must be givers.
Amen.
Thank you for coming, Fathers. Speaking of roles and responsibilities, I was wondering if you had any thoughts on Orthodox Christians who are artists and writers, but not necessarily making icons or hymns or books on theology.
Yes, I have thoughts about that. And Orthodox Christianity has a long history of filling out a culture in ways that are not just liturgical arts. They may be related to the liturgical arts in some way or another, inspired by them, influenced by them, imprinted by them. But what's interesting is, like Orthodoxy in America being so relatively young, and I know people think, well, it's been here for 200 years. That's young, folks. Orthodoxy in America being relatively young, our sense of the whole of Orthodox tradition is still not entirely recovered. We still have not received all of it for ourselves. Like, for instance, a lot of people do not know that the Byzantine era saw multiple commentaries on Homer's Iliad written by Byzantine writers. Right? Our idea of what a Byzantine writer is, well, it's church fathers commenting on the ecumenical councils or whatever, and that's what we think it is. Right? Or, as I like to point out to people, St. Basil the Great, who is a sort of minor saint that no one's ever heard of. He has this entire...
That's why he's called the Great?
That's right, he's pretty great. He has this entire address that he gave to students about how to read pagan literature correctly. Right? This idea of there's this narrow set of things that are sanitized and good and correct, and that's what we do, and then ignore everything outside of that some people have that's their idea of what Orthodox Christianity is. That is just not consonant with our tradition. Our tradition is full of all kinds of music and literature and art that are not the kind of thing that you would put inside a church, but that does not make them evil. It just means that they're a little bit lesser. They're kind of lower down the mountain, so to speak. And that's perfectly okay. And indeed, that's where we spend most of our time. Right? Most of our time is not actually spent inside church services. And so there's a whole world, I think, of possibilities for people who have these skills to do things that are truly human, because being human is what Orthodox Christianity is about, right? So, for instance, at the parish where I'm now attached, All Saints, we just had our feast day, and so the feast day was celebrated with pulled pork barbecue, because Eastern Carolina barbecue is the world's greatest barbecue, and that's just the way that it is. I have room in my stomach for all God's barbecues, but Eastern Carolina is the very highest. And then also there was...
The Memphis people are going to attack.
I know. I just had to put that out there. But then there were also people there kind of on the porch who were playing fiddles and guitars and banjos and all this kind of stuff, because that's North Carolina culture. And it wasn't some weird alien thing. It was the appropriate thing to do on the feast day at a church that's in central North Carolina. There are people who are making all kinds of art that are not liturgical art, it's good Orthodox stuff. It doesn't have to be preaching a sermon, And indeed, if you try to put some kind of sermon or agenda into it, often it's very off-putting,
You don't make Christianity better, you just make rock music worse.
That's right, exactly.
To coin a phrase.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that there is all kinds of room as orthodoxy kind of settles in. We're still really early in the process. It probably won't really be settled in until our great-grandchildren, you know. And that's okay, you know, that's just where we are. As it settles in, there's some good things to do. And I think that this art that is not liturgical art, if it's attempting, I think if it tries to be liturgical art but is actually doing it badly, like not according to the canons and traditions of liturgical art, which I've seen that too, and it's always very cringe, you know? But if it tries to be what it is, but simply is something that is made by someone who is an Orthodox Christian, then it can be blessed and it can be powerful, and can show the beauty of Christ to people in a way that they may not be able to access otherwise, you know? So yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about this, but I mean, like, multiple things that I work on are about trying to read literature, for instance, from an Orthodox point of view, and most of the literature not written by Orthodox people, but to still read it from an Orthodox point of view and find ways that we can interpret it as Orthodox Christians. And then, you know, people can also make this stuff as well. So there's so much that can be done. So if you're one of these people that have these artistic skills, be encouraged, go forth and make, you know, and it's okay to make mistakes. That's how you make stuff that's better, is you break it a bunch of times, and then eventually, once in a while, you make something really amazing.
I'll just add that artists and writers and musicians are the only people we do this to.
Right.
Like, no one goes to an architect and is like, you're only allowed to design churches. Right, or a construction company, you can only build churches. That's it, that's all you can build. Or a carpenter, you can only make crosses. Right, like, we accept with every other profession in the world that you don't have to only do the explicitly Christian version. But for some reason, we put that onus onto writers and artists and musicians. And to me, if something is beautiful, if something is true, that is its connection to God.
Indeed.
It doesn't have to be some explicit, and something that is beautiful and something that is true is far more connected to God than like Christian kitsch that's like ugly and fake. Right.
Father.
I think one of the things that would vote against the people online is to understand that nobody in this room is actually Orthodox. If you take the word in Greek meaning correctly praising, no one always correctly praises God. I would think it would be much better when people join the church and those in the church, if we would explain to them that they are trying to be Orthodox, because they take it as a name instead of a reality of how do I correctly praise God all the time. Because when they get on the internet and they put that label on, I'm Orthodox, my response is, no, you're not Orthodox. You're trying to be Orthodox, which is the basis of humility. Second point I want to quickly make, and I'll get away from here. When I came in, you were talking about people that left the parish. I see a reality that I didn't expect to see, where looking down the road, the majority of the people in at least our churches will be converts. Converts need to understand it's a different cultural background of the ethnic people that were either born here or born over there. Understand their background, understand their circumstances. We are too quick to judge them because we don't understand where they came from or what they went through. That empathy will do us more in learning to love one another than to become super Orthodox. I'm a convert, I know, and you don't know because you don't come to church. Why they don't come to church? Sit down and really talk to them and find out. If you ask me, why did I go to church? Because my mother made me go to church until I was 18 years old. And I got nothing out of going to church. I rebelled, I said I wasn't going to go to church anymore. I told her I was going to become Catholic just to get her to stop pushing me to go to church. However, the Lord took me to another parish where I really found the Orthodox Church. I never looked back. But if we understand where people are coming from, we would be much more able to help to guide them and to help them.
Of course, absolutely.
Hi, fathers. Thank you for being here. So I'm a chanter. This may be a little bit of a scattershot question.
I can't help you.
Okay.
We already covered that earlier.
Regarding chanting and content on the internet, there's kind of a little bit of a boom right now with young men chanters putting themselves out on their personal YouTube channels, choirs and all of this. But there's still a really big gaping hole in a lot that you could listen to. I listen to chant at work sometimes, and there's just not a whole lot that, I can listen to or that I like. And I kind of have mixed feelings sometimes about, maybe I love what this young man is doing, but having a camera on you at the chant stand, singing in front of everybody that, thousands of people can watch, maybe that's not good for your ego, or maybe it's, I don't know if people should be putting out that content, but should it just be very professional academic choirs that put out albums, once every few years? As a young chanter, I might, think, oh, should I start putting stuff out there so people can hear me? I'm just kind of, I've felt a little mixed feelings about the benefits and the harms of having, and I guess in general, just listening to church and chant like at work. It's not the same thing as being in the church and praising the Lord. Sometimes it's just background music. And I just was curious if you have any thoughts about the, proliferation of liturgical music online and, in general through media.
Yeah. The very beginning of Ancient Faith Radio was John Maddox ripping a bunch of CDs that people at his parish had given him, and then he just started streaming them from a laptop from his back porch in Chicago. And, but it's interesting to think about what happens when you record liturgical music. We live in a world of recorded music. I used to be a stagehand, and I remember usually in the summers I did lots and lots of concerts. And I'm sure you've all had the experience, if you've been to a big concert of some popular band where the band is playing the song that everybody's familiar with, but it doesn't sound quite like it does on the album, or quite like it does on Spotify. What's an album?
People buy records now again, actually.
I know, I've heard this, like vinyl.
Yes.
Yeah. It doesn't sound quite the same. And the version that everybody knows and is singing along with is the version that they heard in the recording, which is always exactly the same. And so there's something, there's a distance that's created as a result of doing that. And I think it's important to be mindful of that and to realize that there's a certain contingency to that, right? And then it also can create problems. Like when you're used to, if most of the liturgical music you listen to is recorded by like professional choirs and chanters and stuff, and then you go to church and you don't quite have that professional sound, it can actually be kind of frustrating. Like, that was a blue note and not in a good way, So that's a difficulty there as well. At the same time, I think that there is a benefit to having these things available for people to access them, not just for sort of evangelistic purposes, but like if someone listens to liturgical music and they say that it helps them to get through their day, I'm not going to tell them to stop, But I think that, it's a new thing, right? I mean, it used to be that there was no recorded music at all. Like recording music did not happen. You did not hear music unless you were in the presence of a musician playing it. Live music was the norm, right? And there's something about that is quite different. I think we still haven't quite grappled with it. I mean, the basic question of, should every chanter be getting on the internet? I mean, it's kind of the same question of who should be producing content, whether they have a prayerful approach to that, whether they are doing it in concert with their father confessor, whether it's really needed, look, there's another person who started a channel or started a podcast. I say this as a guy who has started way too many podcasts. I think it's, it's part of the age that we live in, and we have to be We have to be mindful and careful and wise as much as we can be, but realize also there's just a lot of inherent brokenness to the media itself. And just realize, okay, well, it's never going to be perfect, right? It's never going to be perfect. But we can use it in this imperfect way to accomplish some purposes imperfectly, and that's okay. One of the great benefits of recorded church music is, for many people, that's how they learn how to do church music. You know, when I was in seminary, there wasn't, you know, as an Antiochian seminarian, we had one person come once every month or two and give an hour worth of Byzantine music instruction, which is not enough to learn to be a Byzantine chanter, not remotely.
I'm living proof.
But I was able to learn some things from pre-recorded stuff. Now, of course, you can literally take classes in Byzantine chant and interact with a teacher through Zoom, which, you know, one of the weird blessings that has come from the pandemic is that kind of connectivity for training in those things, because most parishes don't have an actually classically trained chanter in the parish who can teach other people how to do that stuff. And so this kind of gives us some of this access. But yeah, we just have to be careful.
Yeah. Tell us some more stories about the days before the phonograph, Grandpa.
Did you know, speaking of the phonograph, I have to say this. Thomas Edison's idea of the phonograph, you know what he thought it was going to be used for? He thought it would be used by most people to record their pastor's sermons so they could listen to them at home. Totally what happened. Not joking. Anyway.
That didn't turn out that way.
No, it did not. No, it did not.
So yeah, I personally don't listen to a lot of chant outside of church because I get enough of that at work. I go home and it's like Kenny Rogers, some Supertramp, maybe some Fog Hat, you know.
Dire Straits.
Yeah, I think there's a big difference, as Father Andrew was alluding to there at the end. If you're posting yourself chanting online, are you doing it in a way where there's like an instructional value to it? Are you teaching people about chant? Are you helping teach people how to chant? Or are you just trying to call attention to how good you believe you are at chanting, right? Those are two different things, right? One of those is about your ego and the other one is about Father Elias Bitar, who is the person who Father Andrew was alluding to earlier, of blessed memory. Father Elias Bitar said to us once, when you are asked to read the epistle in church, you are not singing the national anthem at a ball game. And he's not that far off sometimes, frankly. At one point in a parish, I won't say which one or where, there was a guy who would get up to do the epistle in Arabic and would like cover his ear, like Eddie Murphy in the Party All the Time video, like while he's like chanting. And it turned out from some of the Arabic speaking people that he was actually using melodies from like Arabic pop music while singing like St. Paul's epistle to the Romans. Nice. Right? So we had to kind of deal with that whole situation. But that's a case where, again, it sort of becomes about your ego rather than about, right, instructional value. And that is one of the key things, I think, not just with music on the internet, but anything on the internet.
Yeah.
If anything becomes a vanity project, right, it needs to go. This is why I pick on him so much on Lord of Spirits. I don't want to let him develop vanity, even self-esteem, really. Right. I'm removing that temptation from his path continuously.
This will be our last question.
Thank you, Fathers. This has been good over the course of both days. I think the broad contours of what I'm picking up on and asking, we go to St. Ignatius and we are deluged with people.
I'll bet.
Yeah. And kind of to circle back around, we over-rotate so much on the intellectual content of our catechesis. And Myrna and I have talked a lot about this. These people coming in, and you guys talked about this too, the sort of blasted heath of modern culture, they don't know how to do anything Myrna and I have talked about hospitality. They don't know how to cook. So we're asking people to come in that don't even know how to be. And I wonder if you guys could just maybe riff a little bit more on a practical catechesis, because in many ways I feel like that's lacking. I think that we can backfill the theological content as people are healed through the love of the church. But sometimes it's hard when we have so many people coming at us to know how to just invite them in and love them. And our clergy will get frustrated and people will get frustrated and just be like, why don't they just know how to X? And it's like, they don't. And Father Hans is really great about talking about this. It's like the depth of the woundedness and vacuum that we're encountering in the people that are coming in has really yet to be understood. So I wonder if you guys could just kind of riff on that a little bit more, how we, dealing with this vast influx of people, can catechize them gently and appropriately.
Yeah. In the place that I lived until about 5 weeks ago, the public library would occasionally do classes that they refer to as adulting classes. And you can imagine what, like, one was like, here's how you keep a checkbook, right? Here's how you check on whether and how your car needs maintenance, this kind of stuff. And I think in a lot of ways that Orthodox Christianity in America is going to have to begin to give humaning classes because the disconnection, the alienation the Father was talking about has become so pervasive now. A friend of mine that I've done lots of stuff with, Deacon Seraphim Roland, is doing a series. Ooh. Yeah, him, yeah. Oh. Rowdy Roland. He's doing a series of videos, and it's also an audio podcast, which is called How to Be an Orthodox Christian. And the beginning of it does not say, the Orthodox Church is the second largest Christian community in the world with approximately 250 million members, and it's divided into 14, 15, or 16, depending on how you count them, autocephalous churches, right? That's the beginning of Orthodoxy 101. Someone says, what is the Orthodox Church? And if that's where you go, again, that's not incorrect information. But his very first episode is titled, Let's Start with Martyrdom. And it's kind of the prologue. And then his first real episode is, here's how you enter a church. So you walk in with him and you see him on the camera and he gives you kind of a tour actually of the church, but he shows you what you do. And then the next few episodes, here's how you pray. Here's how you fast. Here's how you give alms. And I believe very firmly, having very much tried the whole Orthodoxy 101 thing myself for a long time, that this is where our catechism needs to go. And I knew that he did that, and so I'm the one who basically twisted his arm to make the show. And he says at the beginning, he says, look, this is not catechism. This is supplement to catechism that your priest might be able to use for you if he feels like it's good. And because when people are invited into the very 3D warmth of what it means to be an Orthodox Christian, then they begin to form relationships with people, and they begin to learn how to be with other people. They begin to learn how to be loved by other people, because often they don't have sort of love receptors. They're not trained in how to love because they were neglected maybe when they were being raised. And, so obviously they're not going to come in day one and know how to do all those things. So you can just say, hey, come sit with us. And maybe they won't say anything at coffee hour, but they'll watch everybody at the table talking to each other and being with each other, and eventually be like, wow, this looks great. And maybe they'll spend a year not knowing how to enter into that. But the key is for people next to them say, hey, what do you think of this? Or tell me about your experience with this, or where are you on this? This kind of thing, to invite them and to ask these good open-ended, curious questions. Like, you can't really love somebody if you're not curious about them. And I think it's our incuriosity that often prevents our loving other people. Like the kind of the worst, if you actually are trying to connect with somebody, the worst thing you can say to them is, so, hey, how are you? Because then the response to that is always like one word or something very brief. It's designed, like that whole exchange, that whole script that we all do over and over again is designed to be a conversation that lasts as short as possible. How are you? Oh, fine, good. Busy, but good, right? And I actually watched a thing giving a suggestion of if you want to break that, if someone says to you, hey, how are you doing? You can say stuff like, and this was my favorite one, same panic, different disco. Because if you say something funny or kind of unexpected like that, then
I'm waiting for funny.
Oh, well, sorry. Thank you, Father. They laughed. Look, not all my jokes are funny to you. It was a courtesy laugh.
You went a little too emo.
A little too emo. But I think that rather than say, hey, how are you, to actually inquire about them in some way that's not invasive, so what do you got going on this weekend? Or what are you excited about? What are you working on right now? Right? These are all good open-ended questions that often a lot of people who have not sort of taken the human classes don't know to do that with people. But I think that if we show that curiosity for other people, then that invites them in. People are attracted to people who are attracted. So if you demonstrate interest in another person, they become interested in what it is that you have to give them. So yeah. I think that. In some ways, evangelism is now easier than it's ever been. Or I should say simpler than it's ever been. Maybe not easy, but simpler than it's ever been. Because many people coming to our doors now have little to no prior religious experience, and so you don't have to unpack it all or whatever. You just say, let me tell you who Jesus is and what he did and what he expects of us. And that's the gospel. I think the time has come. Final words.
I'll be super brief.
All right.
No, just two things to sort of add. Number one, be super patient with people. And let them do what they need to do. Right? If they need to sit in coffee hour for 10 minutes and then go somewhere else to the church library or wherever and sit by themselves for 20 minutes, just let them do that. Right? Just sort of let them do what they need to do. And then when you get the opportunity, right, in terms of things they don't know how to do, you say, hey, do you know how to do this? Let me show you. Right? And those opportunities will present themselves, right? But you have to let a person who's wounded and healed, you have to let them move at their own pace. You can't rush them. You just have to be there ready, making the offer, ready to do it when they're ready to receive it. See how quick I did that?
Good job. Thank you very much, everybody. God bless you.
You've been listening to The Lord of Spirits with Orthodox Christian priests, Father Andrew Stephen Damick and Father Stephen DeYoung, a listener-supported presentation of Ancient Faith Radio. And I beheld, and I heard the voice of many angels round about the throne, and the beasts, and the elders, and the number of them was 10,000 times 10,000, and thousands of thousands, saying with a loud voice, Worthy is the Lamb that was slain to receive power, and riches, and wisdom, and strength, and honor, and glory, and blessing. Revelation chapter 5, verses 11 through 12.